Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's semi-final debate. My name is Tim Porter and I am the chairman of the debate. Timekeeper is Tequila Wood. This debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators, who are Mr. David Morton, Ms. Ring Hassaneem, and Mr. Patrick Moritz. The topic of this debate is that we should allow advertising for prescription medication. The affirmative team seated to my right is from Pulteney Grammar School. The negative team seated to my left is from Glenunga High School. Speaking time for this debate is 6 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Sarah Pellis.
We, as a team, would like to make it clear that we are not proposing that this advertising should be put forward to be peddling pills like some sort of common drug dealer, to unsuspecting consumers. But we are stating that the general public should be told of how to safely use medication and should be shown that when medication is used correctly, it can help those who are suffering from a long-term medical condition and improve their lives, and it can save lives. This may even be done by an independent government-appointed body to ensure that advertising is... Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. To ensure that advertising is neutral and that big drug companies are not able to purely use their money to get the edge over generic brands. We're also proposing that if the drugs were to be marketed by the manufacturers, that an independent government body were to monitor it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and chairman. The topic of tonight's debate is that we should allow advertising for prescription medications. We as the affirmative team believe that this is true. The affirmative team defines we as everyone in Australian society. We define should allow as to make lawful under the Therapeutic Goods Act 1989 or under the Code of Conduct. We define advertising as the act or practice of calling public attention to one's product or service. This includes, but is not limited to, through the medium of radio, television, print publications, and billboards. We define prescription medication as a licensed medicine that is regulated by legislation and requires a medical prescription from a licensed medical practitioner before it can be obtained. I, as your first speaker, will be speaking about the lack of regulation that currently exists under the Code of Conduct, how the current system fosters distrust of medical practitioners, and about the role of marketing genetic brand medication. Our second speaker, Luke, will be talking about the choices that are available to the consumer that are made when advertising is given to them. He'll be talking about the stigma that surrounds prescription medication and why restricted advertising on prescription medication is absurd, considering the fact that alcohol and gambling is still able to be marketed to the public and is not restricted. Our third speaker, Mitch, will sum up the team's case and rebut the opposing team's arguments to prove our team's case. Now on to my first point. The lack of regulation in the Code of Conduct as set up by Medicines Australia is very vague at most, and its voluntary compliance practically makes a mockery of the way that manufacturers are allowed to market their medication. The code prohibits direct advertising to consumers, but there are many loopholes inside this code, even if companies do choose to comply with it. It allows companies to subvert the ban by finding a way around it, possibly through expensive lawyers. The code mainly relies on spontaneous complaints by the general public that are made to Medicines Australia. And the only consequence that these companies currently get under the code is a fine. A fine to drug companies that make billions of dollars globally. It means nothing to them. It also fosters distrust of medical practitioners. When you go to see your doctor, you want to trust them. They're here to take care of you. They're here to ensure that your medical condition is managed to the best of your ability, to make sure that you can set up a plan with them that will make you feel better. You want to be able to confide in them. But with big drug companies essentially grooming doctors by buying them expensive gifts, taking them out to expensive dinners, taking them out for sushi, it becomes a big problem that doctors are being coaxed into using these medications regardless of the laws that currently exist. The advertising is taking place, you just don't know it. The fact that your doctor's prescribing you something such as Pfizer over a generic medication might just be because he got taken out to dinner. The drug companies like to take shortcuts. I mean, if you didn't have to have, if you could just do this by buying a doctor lunch to get your medication prescribed, to get people buying a medication, wouldn't you? If people were going to spend $80 on your medication instead of $20 on the generic brand, wouldn't you think it was worth taking a doctor out to lunch? It fosters distrust in patients because people believe that people don't often know that doctors are coaxed by these drug companies. They become unsure. They may become unsure if they realise exactly how much influence the drug companies have over their healthcare practitioners. Having advertising, particularly for generic brand medications, keeps the consumer informed about that there are many options that are often just as effective and often much cheaper. By marketing generic brands, people will be able to save money and get exactly the same effect, which would greatly help with the current hard financial conditions that many people are facing. If drug manufacturers can openly advertise, the advertisers aren't forced to subvert and get down to these tricky tactics. Advertising fosters an informed conversation, particularly between doctor and patient, about health, disease and treatments that are available to patients. It allows doctor and patient to discuss a treatment plan in which both parties are informed. If drug manufacturers can openly advertise, then they are creating an idea that people need to take drugs for conditions. They're showing them how they can help. They're making them informed so we can all have an informed discussion. Thank you.
I will now call upon the first negative speaker, Pulteney Bandara.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, opposition, adjudicators, chairman and timekeeper. I'm Pavani, and tonight the topic for our debate is that we should allow advertising for prescription medication. We agree with the definition given by the affirmative team, and tonight, as the negative team, we strongly believe that prescription medicine should not be advertised. Today, as the first speaker of the negative team, I will persuade you, firstly, that advertising prescription medicine will have an adverse effect on society. My second point is that advertising prescription drugs will challenge the long-term safety of us all. Our second speaker, Ira, will convince you all that the advertising of prescription drugs would benefit the industries rather than the patients, and also that it causes an increase in healthcare costs. And finally, our third speaker, Parika, will sum up our team's case and persuade you, once and for all, that prescription drugs most definitely should not be advertised. Before I start my speech, I would like to rebut several flaws in the opposition's case. The first affirmative speaker has stated that doctors are influenced by drug manufacturers and thus allowing advertising will not change anything. However, we believe that this is not true. As advertising has a significant effect still on consumers, and I will describe this in one of my later points. The first affirmative speaker also stated that advertising will promote and encourage a relationship between doctors, medical professionals and patients, such that the patients are more informed about the decisions they have to make in relation to their illnesses. The affirmative team has pointed out some of the positive effects of advertising. However, we strongly believe that these positive effects are insignificant as other negative effects, such as self-medication, means that advertising is actually a very big risk to our society. I will also talk about this in one of my later points, but the basis of self-medication is that through advertising, people, they gain the information and the thoughts that they should self-medicate themselves. And especially in regards to prescription medicine, this can be very bad, as prescription medicine are prescribed for a reason. They can be dangerous, and so this practice of self-medication arising from advertising can be very dangerous. Now, and the first speaker has also stated that advertising prescribed medication and informing patients will enable lesser financially able consumers to make better decisions, etc. But we strongly believe that advertising usually promotes more expensive drugs. And we have to always remember that advertising works on a profit motive, and so we believe that this will not help consumers who are in a worse financial position. My first point tonight is that if we are to advertise prescription drugs to the general public, this will have a very significant and adverse effect on society. Firstly, prescription medicine is prescribed by medical professionals because they're for illnesses and injuries that are serious. Prescription medicine is dangerous, and this is why the authority to give this medicine is solely restricted to doctors who have the expertise and knowledge to only give it in the right amounts and only to those who really need it. Now, in advertising forms of media such as TV, internet, radio and billboards are used to sell products to people. I would like to remind you all that advertising is not objective and most definitely is not informative. I mean, how many unbiased, correct, informative ads have we ever seen in our lifetimes? Especially, imagine those ads where dentists promote things such as toothpaste to consumers, and I'd like to remind you all that these people in ads are not doctors. They're not medical professionals. They are merely actors. And as consumers, we take things at face value, and this gives rise to consumerism, which can also be very dangerous. We strongly believe that society will be adversely affected by such biased advertising. Furthermore, knowledge about such medication may drive patients to self-medicate themselves. Imagine if one of you had back pain, or what you believe to be back pain. If you see an advertisement, say on TV or on the internet, you might then go off and self-medicate yourself, which may be very dangerous. We also strongly believe that this self-medication encourages confrontation with medical professionals, and which may then lead to these professionals being influenced to provide this medication. And my second point for tonight's debate is that the long-term safety of us all will be challenged if prescription drugs are freely advertised to the general public. If drugs are advertised and thus demand for prescription drugs increases, another issue that needs to be taken into consideration is that these drugs do not take into account long-term side effects. The adverse effects, including superbugs, may affect the consumer's long-term safety, and thus this is very dangerous.
Sit down, please.
Sorry.
Adjudicators, just thought, point of note, second affirmative speaker is Luke Radford and third affirmative speaker is Mitch Brunker, so I just got them switched around.
Say that again?
Second affirmative speaker is Luke Radford and third affirmative is Mitch Brunker.
Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Luke Radford.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Luke Radford, and as I'm sure you are aware, I'm the second affirmative speaker. And tonight's topic, as I'm sure you are also aware, is that we should allow the advertising of prescription medication. And as the affirmative team, we wholeheartedly support this statement. Now, our first speaker, Sarah, already addressed that the lack of regulation in regards to advertising of prescription medication encourages drug companies to take shortcuts, and this is extremely negative. She also informed you that the current system fosters distrust in medical professionals, which is also a negative thing. And she also informed you that the role of generic brand medicine is crucially important, otherwise known as prescription medication. As the second speaker tonight, I will be addressing the ideas that we need to raise the awareness of prescription medication through advertising. We also need to address the negative stigma which is associated with prescription medication, and why should prescription medication be not allowed to be advertised when alcohol and gambling are? But first, I'd like to point out some obvious flaws in the opposition's argument. The first negative speaker stated that drug advertising promotes self-medication. And I'm sure this may be true, but prescription medication requires a prescription. You can't just go out and buy it. You need to see your GP. Your GP needs to sign off on a prescription which allows you to then buy it. You have to jump through hoops, so to say. Which means that self-medication is extremely difficult. The first negative speaker also stated that prescription meds are prescribed by a doctor and that the people in adverts are not doctors, and this promotes consumerism. I'm sure this is true. As you're all aware, people in adverts are actors. However, as I said before, prescription meds require a prescription. Without a prescription, you cannot acquire them, and thus consumerism cannot occur. Now, on to my first point. Ladies and gentlemen, early medical intervention means that patients get early treatment, meaning that they are on the road to recovery earlier. If people know about the diseases and the possible symptoms of these diseases, and which can be raised through the medium of advertising, then they will be able to recognise when it is time to have a chat with their local GP or medical professional. An important benefit of direct-to-consumer advertising is that it fosters an informed conversation about health, disease and treatments between patients and their care practitioners. My second point is about the negative stigma associated with prescription medication. Currently, the stigma surrounding prescription medication is one of extreme negativity. If you heard your friend was on prescription meds, I'm sure you would be concerned for their well-being. You would want to know what's wrong. Are they okay? What drugs are they on? And this is extremely negative. It raises an extreme negative connotation around prescription medication. If these connotations, this stigma, was to be broken, it would be to the benefit of all. And what's one of the ways we can break it? Greater public awareness. And how can we raise public awareness? That's right, advertising. Therefore, advertising prescription meds should be allowed, as it increases the awareness of diseases, encouraging people to seek earlier treatment, as I explained earlier, which in the end results in healthier people. Now, let's sit down and have a chat about alcohol and gambling. Two products which are currently allowed to advertise in this country, legally. Prescription medication, as I remind you, is not. Products which are equally detrimental to a person's health as prescription medication if it is to be abused. But gambling and alcohol can't save a life. Prescription medication can. So why should two products, pleasure products, let me remind you, be allowed to be advertised in this country when a life-saving device cannot? It just doesn't make sense, ladies and gentlemen. Prescription medication should be able to be advertised. And as I mentioned earlier, this will raise awareness and increase the health of people that take it, which is extremely, extremely important. Now, as I've addressed tonight, the negative connotations of prescription medication is not need to be broken. They need to be destroyed. They need to be gotten rid of, because it's not helping prescription medication. It's not helping people. Awareness needs to be raised for prescription medication, so that people understand that if they have these diseases, these symptoms, then they need to go and see their doctor and get prescription meds. And advertising is how we can do this. I also mentioned that alcohol and gambling are allowed to be advertised in this country, funnily enough, whereas prescription medication is not. Thank you.
call upon the second negative speaker, Ira Perry.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, adjudicator, opposition, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate tonight is that we should allow advertising for prescription medicines. We, the negative team, strongly disagree with this statement, and I, as second speaker tonight, will justify to you why this is so. I would like to begin by pointing out some major flaws in the opposition's argument. The first speaker of the affirmative team has said that the current system fosters distrust of medical practitioners. However, we do not agree that advertisements in fact result in more falsely portrayed information. Advertisements are one of the sole sources of side effects in all aspects of industry, and consequently would result in more falsely portrayed information, as advertisements don't convey to people the cautions of using such medicines. The first speaker of the affirmative team has also said that doctors are already coaxed by drug companies. However, advertisements wouldn't help to overcome this problem, and consequently, the advertisements don't serve a purpose in overcoming the coaxing that these doctors may currently be experiencing. In fact, advertisements would simply worsen this problem in the fact that it would make doctors believe that it is all right to prescribe such medication under pressure, as it would in fact be made legal through the government condoning advertisements. The second speaker has said that prescription medicines require a prescription. However, we are aware of this, yet we are simply stating that advertisements result in customers self-diagnosing themselves, and consequently they go to their doctors to try to obtain such medicines, which even if they don't actually need them. The second speaker of the affirmative team has also said that we need to address the negative stigma associated with prescription medicines as advertising increases awareness. However, although this may be true, the more prominent problem at hand is that it can cause unnecessary dependence. Now to our team's case. Our first speaker, Pulteney, has talked to you about the side effects that such drugs have, and that they tend to negatively affect the long-term safety of society. Tonight, as second speaker, I will be talking to you about how the advertisement of prescription medicines is a huge strain on healthcare costs, and how it would result in a competition between medical industries. Our third speaker, Parika, will rebut our opposition and sum up our team's case. My first point is that prescription drug ads drastically increase healthcare costs. 78% of doctors surveyed in 2013 agreed that the advertisement of prescription drugs caused huge increases in the costs of healthcare. The advertised drugs would increase costs for emergency rooms, doctor appointments, and medicines, which ultimately leads to an increase of medical expenses. As the prices of prescription medical medicines would increase, so would the prices of everyday medicines. And these advertisements would cause more harm than good, as this type of marketing through advertisement is designed to convince customers that they need the medication, which happens to be far more expensive. The advertised prescription drugs would be a newly patented and extremely high-priced drug. In a sense, both the doctors and the consumers are sucked into the traps of these advertisements, and the use of these causes a significant increase in yearly healthcare costs for our country. In addition, consumers would begin to request new medications which they see on television, even if comparable yet cheaper generic versions of such a medicine are available. As a result, such advertisements would see a sharp rise in healthcare costs, which would be detrimental to our society, and the government wouldn't be able to support such high costs in the medical sector. Now to my second point, which is that the advertising of prescription medicines, just like the advertising of other products, would become more a fight for the market share of industries rather than the concern for the safety of patients. Similar to how fast food chains such as McDonald's and KFC use advertising as a way of trying to influence people to buy their products, the advertising of prescription medicines would benefit the producers far more than it would benefit the consumers. Also, like most advertisements, an ad about prescription drugs can give people false information about the product. Advertising drugs would not include the cautions and side effects of the said drug. And this shows once more that it's a fight of the industries for the market share, not for the concern of the patients. And companies would become competitive, and like most other organisations, they would start worrying about their profits rather than the purpose. With healthcare, it is very important that the health of the patient is put as the foremost concern of medical experts and practitioners, rather than the fight for profits. And consequently, the advertisement of prescription medicines is not a cost-conducive system. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we, the negative team, strongly believe that we should not allow advertising for prescription medicines. I would like to end with a quote said by Dr. Anne-Marie Whale. "Prescription drug ads strengthen our belief in pharmaceutical drugs as the cures for all of our problems. However, the consequences of lifestyle choices cannot be undone with the use of prescription medicines." Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Mitch Brunker.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, negative team. My name is Mitch, and I'm the third speaker for the affirmative team tonight. And we as a team strongly believe that we should allow advertising for prescription medication. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be summarising my team's case, and I'll rebut the frankly misleading arguments of the negative team. To begin with, the first speaker argued about that advertising would challenge the long-term safety of society. I'm really sure I think we can agree. But medication aims to help people. It cures people of ailments, and surely being more informed of this medication through advertising campaigns makes this medication safer, makes society safer in the long term. And to build on that, if people have greater access, greater informed about this medication, it will help the health of society. Life expectancy will increase, people will become more in harmony with each other. The first speaker also put forward that advertising has a significant effect on consumers, and yes, I think we can agree, but it is a positive effect, not a negative effect. It gives people more information, it gives them greater trust, etc. Ideas that Luke and Sarah presented to you earlier to convince you of the benefits of advertising prescription medication. The first speaker also spoke of the idea that advertising will bring on self-medication, and the idea of this is clearly a negative one. But currently, without legal medical advertising, companies, the big companies, Pfizer, Bayer, they're using loopholes in the law, in the regulations, to encourage people to buy medication by creating these false ideas of conditions that require medication. Mild conditions such as mild anxiety are being used, that medication is being prescribed by these companies, not by doctors. But if advertising was brought about legally through the Therapeutic Goods Act, then this would bring a regulation similar to advertising for, say, alcohol or gambling, and this would prevent the idea of self-medication being implanted in people. first speaker also argued that prescription medication can be dangerous, and this is true, but only if it is abused. Surely I think we can all read the warning labels on prescription medication. Don't abuse the medication, it's a simple idea. And we certainly agree that it can be dangerous if used in the wrong circumstances. And we are not in favour of removing the prescription, the protection that is in place to protect people from this abuse and from gaining prescription medications without a reason. With advertising, I don't think it's going to remove the prescription. Advertising simply informs people more. It's not removing the prescription, it's not removing this vital safeguard of society. The first speaker also brought about how ads are not staffed by medical professionals, they're not staffed by doctors, they are actors. This is true. But that is again why the prescription should remain in place. We're not listening to these actors in the ads, we're listening to our doctors. We go to our GP and we say, well, we have this condition, and what would you recommend? If they recommend a medication, then yes, but if they don't, well, then we're not going to get it. The prescription is the safeguard that protects us. The advertising is not going to remove this safeguard. The first speaker also suggested that patients may be influenced under self-medication, self-diagnosis. But if the medical profession are influenced by a patient and their hypochondria, I would suggest that a hard look is taken at their medical licence. The second speaker spoke about argued about our point about the fostering of distrust amongst medical practitioners. We're not talking about misconveyed information here. We're arguing that doctors are being bribed, if you will, by these big companies, the Bayer and the Pfizer, but these advertisements would mean that companies don't need to coax doctors anymore, that these companies can just advertise like a normal product, that they don't need to bribe these members of trust in our community. The second speaker also talked about how that there could be an endemic of self-diagnosis brought upon by advertising. Again, if a doctor gives them this medication, then that, ladies and gentlemen, is simply malpractice, to give a patient medication without it being needed. And this is wrong. And we're not suggesting that advertising would change this, it simply makes people more informed. Second speaker also talked about how prescription medication and the hypochondria that can result. But we're also talking about how the advertising can expound the benefits of generic medication, which is again cheaper and works just as well as the big name medication. So by using this advertising, we can make people more informed to this generic medication, that they can then get the same benefits from the big name brands, but without this cost, without this cost of society that the negative team is arguing would be brought on. Second speaker further brought up again about how doctors would give in to requests for medication. Again, this is malpractice. It would not be permitted in our society with all of the medical boards and associations that exist. And if these medications are not given, then the rising cost of the medical profession simply will not happen. Then if it's not given, then these costs and the opposition's argument simply won't happen. Second speaker also talked about how there can be false information in ads, but we would suggest, ladies and gentlemen, like alcohol and gambling, there will be an obligation to put in a warning of the medication and the adverse side effects. We're not suggesting that the big companies just let this advertisement run wild on our televisions and on our billboards. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight our team has discussed about how prescription medication should be allowed to advertise. Our first speaker, Sarah, spoke of how there is currently a lack of regulation with the Therapeutic Goods Act and the Code of Conduct, and that there is a mistrust in the medical profession because of this coaxing of doctors, and that this can be broken by the advertising of prescription medication. And she finally spoke of the role of generic medication and its increased benefits with advertisement. Luke, our second speaker, informed you of how the advertising medication can inform the community and help us get on that road to recovery. He also spoke about how the stigma of prescription medication and this negative stigma would be broken, and that the damaging effect of alcohol and gambling, these things can advertise, so why not embrace the benefits of prescription medication being advertised, these things that can benefit society. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've convinced you tonight on the benefits of advertising prescription medication. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Parika Verma.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, Adjudicator, the Opposition, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate tonight is that we should allow advertising for prescription medicines. As third speaker, I would first like to start off by rebutting the opposition's case. The first speaker of the opposition has talked about the lack of reliability of the current laws of Australia and how there's loopholes to it, and how currently there are many doctors that can be bribed and who can be lured into selling medicines and prescribing people to medicines that they may not necessarily need, and they may not necessarily be the best for them. We would like to emphasize on the fact that advertising of prescription medicine is simply going to emphasize on the effect of this. If the companies who can actually just afford to sell, who can just take these doctors out to dinners and parties and whatnot, are probably going to be the ones who are going to be spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on advertising, and hence people will be looking at these advertisements and will be asking for these particular medicines as well, and so the effect of this will just spiral out of control, because not only are we now influencing the doctors by these big companies, we're also advertising the consumers. So how are they meant to be completely informed of what's happening? Another point that they raised was that, and also the fact is that most of the prescription medicines that are advertised are the newer and the more expensive ones, because these are the ones that the consumers and the doctors and everyone around are not aware of. And hence, and because people are not aware of this, the fact is that advertising will not help inform people, as these medicines are relatively new to the market and have not been tested as much and may not be the most reliable ones out there. And the second speaker has also talked about how self-medicating will not be an option with prescription medicine, because for that you need a prescription. Well, we also talked about how advertising has a great influence on society these days. We see an advertising and we think, and the consumerism of a society encourages us to go out there and get that particular product that we've seen. And if we think that, oh, I've had a cold today, let me go out, and you see this wonderful ad of this particular miraculous medicine which can help you get over that cold or whatnot it might be, you are going to want to go out there and get it. And you are going to go to your doctor and convince them, oh yes, I have these symptoms, I have this, I feel this, and I really want this. And they are obviously going to want to convince their doctor that yes, I have this particular symptoms and I need these particular medicines. And that is how we think that they're going to medicate themselves, as they're just going to think, as many people tend to just get swayed by these advertisements and these fancy little posters and banners. Another point that he talked about how ads can inform people of different symptoms of diseases, and how it encourages people to get medical attention. The fact is that ads are meant to be for the benefit of producers and not the consumers. These are ads that are put up by multi-million-dollar companies, and they're not concerned as much about they're concerned more about the profits when they spend thousands of dollars making these ads than actually the benefit of society. Along with this, the ads of prescription drugs may also lead to false expectations of the consumers. You cannot fully tell the person of the effects of a particular medicine or any such product in just a 30-second ad or so. You need proper attention, and as our society can so easily be swayed by these ads, it is not safe for us to have prescription medicine on TV as a part of advertisement. The third speaker also talked about negative stigma that arises from prescription medicine. Yes, although there might be a negative stigma associated with such advertisements, there's a reason for such a negative stigma. Prescription medicines are needed purely as a treatment for specific forms of illnesses. If the general public is portrayed with such information, and if they experience some of these said symptoms, the ads will just cause them to believe that they have these symptoms again, and even the medicine and other cheaper forms of medicine, and they're probably going to want to buy those more expensive or more fancy medicines than the cheaper form that is already available. The social stigma surrounding the advertisement is very well justified in this case. And my team would also like to emphasize on the fact that the best way to inform the public is not through advertisement. there are forums available. There is online forums available. There's newspapers available. There's a lot of, you can talk to your doctor. But the best way to advertise, the best way to inform the public of if you're suffering of a particular disease or an illness is not through advertisement, as obviously you can't inform them for every single one, and the one that is the most common, I guess you're going to know anyway. So I would now like to summarize my team's case. Our first speaker talked about the adverse effects of prescription drugs that they can have on society. These people may start self-diagnosing, and they may lose faith in their doctors because they think that they have this particular disease when they actually may not. The second point was that prescription drugs challenge the long-term safety of our society. Our second speaker explained how the advertising of prescription drugs would make industries more competitive, and it would also become more about the company's profit than the society's benefit in general. Also, that prescription drugs will increase the cost of healthcare as well. Overall, we strongly believe that prescription medicine should not be allowed to be advertised on television, as it will do definitely more harm than good to our society. Thank you.